landmark trials that were conducted in the past. So these are the large trials like UKPDS, ACCORD, ADVANCE and PADT. So in these trials, it was found that even when the intensive glycemic control is done, when compared to standard glycemic control, it could reduce, in short term, it reduced the microvascular complications. However, in long term, there was inconsistent results, and also there was inconsistency in the cardiovascular disease reduction, that is macrovascular complications, as well as cardiovascular mortality. So, and also it was seen that intensive glycemic control is not associated with any heart failure benefits. So here you can see that none of these results have been significant. So right now what all the ADA and ESC guidelines, they say that multifactorial management of cardiovascular risk factors is required for these patients, and they have set different targets like HbA1c of less than 7%, and for patients who have high CV risk, blood pressure target of less than 130 by 80 millimeter of mercury, and for those patients with high CV risk, the LDL should be less than 70 milligram per deciliter, and for moderate CV risk, less than 100 milligram per deciliter. And as Sir said rightly, weight loss and smoking cessation need to be done. So, sir, if I may ask Dr. Raghu sir here, sir has already talked about all the comorbidities and so how can you, would you like to share your thoughts on how to manage these patients holistically? So you can unmute yourself, sir.
Diabetes is not the only cause for cardiovascular disease. We know already our colleague Krishna Mohan has covered all the associated modifiable risk factors like hypertension, obesity, lipid abnormalities, sedentary lifestyle. All these are important. Smoking. In addition to that, non-modifiable risk factors like age, male sex more than 65, female sex of more than 50, male of more than 55 and female of more than 65, and it's a genetic risk factor. These are all the other associated risk factors. In addition to diabetes, plays a major role in causing cardiovascular disease and increasing the myocardial infarction, heart failure, stroke, and peripheral vascular disease and chronic kidney disease. In addition to diabetes control, probably we have to control all the other comorbidities to reduce all these cardiovascular factors. That's what it is.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Sepuri, sir, would you like to add your thoughts here?
Yeah, that's what as Raghu sir said. We need to take all the risk factors, because sir has accurately said we can divide the risk factors into the modifiable risk factors and the unmodifiable risk factors, whereas all others are the modifiable risk factors, except the genetic preponderance, which is a non-modifiable risk factor, and the family history of diabetes or hypertension or CAD or stroke, that becomes always an unmodifiable risk factor. Barring that, and everything is a modifiable risk factor. Like you can meticulously control the diabetes, you can meticulously control the hypertension by the other with multiple algorithms. Like, okay, all the time start with either ACE inhibitor or ARB and never combine. Please, once again, I mind all my colleagues. Never try to combine ACE inhibitor with ARB, because it has got very serious effects. Acute hyperkalemia leading to the fulminant cardiac, the renal failure, and so on. The electrolytic imbalances may lead to sudden deaths also. So on top of this, you can add either a calcium channel blocker, CCB, the dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker, or a thiazide like diuretic. And I mind once again my all fellow colleagues, please, it's high time to discourage hydrochlorothiazide, which is thiazide type of diuretic. That causes dysglycemia in a patient of diabetes, and it induces diabetes in a non-diabetic individual. So please make it a habit to stop writing the hydrochlorothiazide and to go for chlorthalidone or the indapamide, which have got the proven CV safety and data. And on top of an ARB, you can add either the calcium channel blocker. If not sufficiently controlled, you can add 12.5 milligram of chlorthalidone or the indapamide. And most of the times in our clinical practice, we use only the chlorthalidone, the time tested and time trusted molecule, though it is long acting. And we have to be cautious in the elderly patients above 75 because of the long action of this chlorthalidone, which may cause some amount of dyserclitemia, especially the hypokalemia in the elderly, like 70 plus or 75 plus. And but for that, and if you treat the patient you put the patient on a statin, like okay, the high intensity statin, depending upon the situation, either the atorvastatin ranging from 20 to 40 milligram or 40 to 80 milligram, or the rosuvastatin the 10 to 20 milligram or 20 to 40 milligram. And if all these parameters are taken care, I think it's the holistic approach. And if at all there is a need, you need to put the patient on the antiplatelets, either the aspirin or the C2 vital inhibitors, like either the clopidogrel, the gold standard, or the prasugrel. And after this twilight study, now the ticagrelor has come into limelight. The 90 milligram of ticagrelor has been studied extensively in this twilight study in acute coronary syndromes, whether DAPT, that is dual antiplatelet treatment, should be continued for a year, or 1 month of DAPT or 3 months of DAPT with aspirin once a day with 75 to 150 milligram of aspirin, and this particular ticagrelor 90 milligram BD for 1 to 3 months, and stop the aspirin and continue the ticagrelor rest of the life. That decreases the bleeding tendency also, but it is not the affordable to all segments, as clopidogrel is the cheapest the antiplatelets we have got. And prasugrel, I don't think prasugrel is in the game at all. See, it's almost like it's ruled out. Either the aspirin plus either the clopidogrel or the ticagrelor is the drug of choice, and statin is mandatory. With all this holistic approach, I think we can definitely give a good result to the patient and a good quality of living also to the patients. That's what my conclusion is.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move ahead to the next section.
Yeah.
So this is the summary of all the glucose lowering medications that we have, and here we can see that only SGLT2 inhibitors, they tick all the boxes. That is, not only do they cause glycemic control, it also has a lower risk of hypoglycemia, it causes weight loss, reduces blood pressure, and also possibly has a positive effect on lipid profile. So this is a phase 2 study where empagliflozin was compared to that of sitagliptin, and it was seen that at various baselines of HbA1c 8%, 9% and 10%, the slope of decline is much steeper for empagliflozin compared to that of sitagliptin. And for every 1% increase in the HbA1c baseline, HbA1c, the corresponding HbA1c reduction at 24 weeks was for empagliflozin minus 0.49% and for sitagliptin minus 0.29%. And this is a study from, this is a systematic review and meta-analysis. And here this was Dr. V. Mohan's article along with other authors. So here the SGLT2 inhibitors, DPP4 inhibitors and GLP-1RA have been compared in Asian populations versus white or the Caucasian population for to see which is having a better glucose lowering efficacy. And it was found that for SGLT2 inhibitors, the effect is much more for the Asians compared to that of the Caucasians. But for DPP4 inhibitors, there was an effect, but it was much lesser than that seen for SGLT2 inhibitors. And for GLP-1RA, there was no significant difference in ethnicity. So this is another study which showed that Empagliflozin significantly improved the time in range in uncontrolled type 2 DM patients over 28 days. So here you can see this is the baseline, day 1 and day 28, and empagliflozin 10 milligram and 25 milligram have been compared to that of placebo. So initially this red portion, that is the glucose level is over 180 milligram per deciliter in all the 3 cases, but on day 1 if you see the green portion improves in empagliflozin but not for placebo, and further on day 28 it further improves. So which means that empagliflozin improves the time in range in uncontrolled type 2 DM patients. So this is a long time back this study was published where empagliflozin was compared to that of glimepiride as an add-on to metformin, and it was seen that the weight loss which is happens with empagliflozin, it is maintained over a period of 4 years, and the difference between them was minus 4.9 kilograms. And this is a study called the SACRA study. SACRA study was where this is a Japanese study where empagliflozin was tried in nocturnal uncontrolled hypertension, and it was found that not only it reduces the nighttime blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic, it also reduces daytime blood pressure and 24-hour blood pressure. And also the morning home blood pressure reduction was also seen both for systolic blood pressure as well as diastolic blood pressure. As you can see here, the red is the empagliflozin compared to placebo in blue. And so, sir, if I may ask Dr. Sepuri, sir, so nocturnal hypertension, it is an independent risk factor for CV diseases. So what could be the clinical implications of SGLT2 inhibitors being effective in reducing nocturnal BP?
Yes, that's a wonderful question, Dr. Smita. And undoubtedly, and there is no dispute that the nocturnal hypertension is a proven independent risk factor for cardiovascular diseases. And the clinical implications of reducing the nocturnal BP with the SGLT2 inhibitors, especially the empagliflozin, I would like to quote the study what you had mentioned, the gold standard, the landmark study, the SACRA study, that is the SGLT2 inhibitors and the ARB combination therapy in patients with the type 2 diabetes mellitus with uncontrolled nocturnal hypertension. This was done by the Japanese researchers actually, and in this what they did is they added empagliflozin to the standard care of antihypertensive therapy what the patient was receiving prior to this study, and just they added empagliflozin to this particular standard care of antihypertensive therapy to see the advantages of this particular the beneficial role in reducing either the systolic blood pressure or the diastolic blood pressure. Per se, the benefits of the SGLT2 inhibitors, if we summarize, apart from the glucose lowering effects, apart from providing the robust protection for the heart, robust protection for the kidney, apart from that, it is known to reduce the weight by say excreting somewhere around 80 to 160 grams of glucose every day from the urine. And apart from that, the greatest advantage is that is able to reduce the systolic blood pressure very significantly, and to some extent the diastolic blood pressure also, which is of prominent importance in the day-to-day clinics, because nocturnal hypertension is one that goes undiagnosed most of the times. And I would like to say that ambulatory blood pressure monitoring must be done in almost each and every case wherever it is possible, because that only can trace out the nocturnal hypertension and then the dipping pattern and the non-dipping pattern, that is it can differentiate the dippers and the non-dippers also. And so EBPM plays a very vital role in detecting the nocturnal hypertension, or the home monitoring also can be advised, but we are not so advanced and our patients are not so advanced to maintain a hypertension, the BP log or the glycemic control log as the people do in the Western scenario, where they meticulously check the blood sugars 6 times a day, 2-3 times the blood pressure with the digital ones have come. They do that on a regular basis, so that will give the lot of information about the white coat hypertension or the masked hypertension, and about the nocturnal hypertension also. So the greatest role of this particular the outcomes of SACRA study was the addition of empagliflozin to the antihypertensive regime what the patients were using resulted in a reduction of the 24-hour BP reduction by 10 millimeters of mercury of systolic blood pressure and 3.5 millimeters of diastolic blood pressure on 24-hour basis. And when you come to this nocturnal hypertension, the empagliflozin, addition of empagliflozin was able to reduce somewhere around some 6.3 to 6.4 millimeters of mercury in the diastolic systolic blood pressure, and that the reduction of 2.5 millimeters of mercury in the diastolic blood pressure. And the daytime it was somewhere around the empagliflozin showed a result of 11.7 millimeters of mercury in the systolic blood pressure in the daytime, and a reduction of 4.1 millimeters of mercury in the diastolic in the daytime. So there is a very positive beneficial role of empagliflozin adding to the standard care of antihypertensives, as shown in the SACRA study, that which significantly reduces the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure in the uncontrolled nocturnal hypertension. So definitely I would like to stress upon the fact that empagliflozin plays a very vital role in controlling the uncontrolled nocturnal hypertension, as per the evidence-based medicine what SACRA study shows, and thereby reduces the cardiovascular disease, for which the nocturnal hypertension is a very, very big risk factor. And in particular, the nocturnal hypertension or the non-dipper pattern, especially the non-dipper pattern of the nighttime BP, is a strong predictor of either the coronary artery disease or the cardiovascular disease, or the new term is atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, including the non-ischemic heart failure, both in patients with hypertension and in general population also. So I request Dr. Raghu sir to add on anything if I had missed in my narration.
I think you have covered everything. Only thing, non-dippers are more prone for cardiovascular disease. Especially
Yeah, that's what sir I said. Yeah, that's what I said.
That's correct. Whatever you told, correct.
Yeah.
The only thing, whether it can be extended to non-diabetic.
Yeah, that's what sir.
Non-diabetic group of
That's what. Non-dippers are at more risk of developing this. So we need to pick up the non-dippers actually.
and with whether this can be given in non-diabetic, non-dippers, and especially uncontrolled hypertension and
No, sir.
therapy in addition to anti-hypertension.
No. So far there is no.
Probably we
Yeah.
have to study that aspect.
Yes, sir. Maybe in the couple of years we may get the recommendations that even empagliflozin can be added to the standard care of the hypertensive therapy in patients not suffering from diabetes also, so as to take care of the non-dippers as well as the control of nocturnal hypertension, sir. Maybe you are absolutely right in that aspect.
Because there are already studies, it reduces blood pressure, it reduces LVH.
Yes, sir. And even the left ventricular mass index is also reduced considerably.
And diastolic dysfunction also, it's how it's going to work.
Yes, absolutely, sir.
Probably there are some data. Probably we are take on this probably for future.
Yeah, in future, I think it may come in the guidelines, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.